talking about Putin, why do you think the world, including the United States, continues to appease Putin on a daily basis? The U.S. especially gives him an inch, he takes a mile. And then he takes 10 miles, 100 miles. He's doing it in Ukraine, Syria, across the world now. Why, all the European countries, why are so many countries on a regular basis appeasing Putin?
Oh, no, I think the history of this appeasement, if we look back to 2000 and then we move to, to 2015, probably the nature of appeasement has changed because in the beginning of Putin's rule, there were still high expectations about Russia, gradually, but steadily changing into something, quite democratic. So under Yeltsin, Russia had maybe feeble democracy. Everybody knew that it was not, very, it was not bulletproof. But people expected Russia to develop and to improve. And Yeltsin was given a huge political and financial credit from the Western countries, which, by the way, refutes the whole story and then Putin's narrative that Russia has been insulted after the collapse of the Soviet Union and Russia needed just to recover its pride. So there's nothing wrong. I lived there, I traveled around the world, and to the contrary, Russia was invited to G7. Russia had access to Western financial markets, and there were many cases where the West could put pressure on Russia, but decided against it. For instance, in 1995 was the first time when Bill Clinton raised the issue of Iranian nuclear program with Russia. So it's a long story. It started in mid-90s, and Russia was a principal supplier of nuclear technology to Iran. And at that time, Russia depended heavily on U.S. credits, and the Congress actually wanted to to impose, not sanctions, but conditions, demanding Russia to stop these transactions of these technologies. And Clinton decided it was too harsh, so he let it go. So there were big expectations, and again, I can hardly blame people. It's what in America and Europe, because everyone wanted to see Russia as a friend. But what's happened is that by 91, 92, the world needed a new vision, a strategy, how to reorganize all these international institutions, including the United Nations. It was a different, geopolitical infrastructure. But nobody had time, nobody had political will to do something so dramatic. So that's why it all was, just nice time. So nobody wanted to make big decisions. Now, after 9/11, it was a different nature of appeasement, because naturally Bush and new American administration and Europeans looked at the radical Islam and the terror coming from this part of the world as a main threat. So having Putin as maybe an ally, who was also fighting with Chechen rebels, though it was quite a different story, but Putin succeeded in convincing them. Also, they wanted to be convinced. Let's be honest. So they wanted to be convinced that it's the same story. So that's why Putin was brought as a part of this global coalition against terror. And Russians also provided a very important assistance in Afghanistan, because there were supply lines, and it was much cheaper to go through Russian supply lines than just to do otherwise. So there were other reasons. And again, everybody wanted to be convinced that Putin is a good guy. Maybe not a very good guy because he was a KGB, but it's something will change, because if we embrace Russia, if we engage Russia, if we offer them more incentives, who will object taking this and becoming more civilized and bringing Russia into the family of these democratic nations.
But like with Crimea, it becomes clear to all Western leaders.
Yeah, but it's Crimea. I mean, I believe there were enough experts in this country, Russian experts, to understand that the signs on the wall were earlier. Yeah, right. The first thing Putin did in 2000 was to restore Soviet anthem. Okay, it's just when the former KGB officer, who was known before he became president for saying that there were no former KGB officer, once KGB, ever KGB, restoring Soviet anthem. I mean, it sends you a signal that somewhere in the back of his mind, you know, like it's as a Freudist's reaction. Yeah, he had an idea of a restoration. And then, a bit later, he came up with a statement that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. Now, put these three together, and you can understand that if given a chance, he would do this, and that. And he didn't have this chance. But even being much weaker than now, even not having all these powers, he couldn't help but expressing his true nature. They ignored it. And then, you know, we had many other signs. And for me, actually, the turning point was 2007.
Georgia.
Because Georgia followed. In 2007, Putin had to make a choice because there were two terms, the two constitutional terms. Yeltsin left.
When he switches.
Yeah, Yeltsin. So, and Putin at that time probably was already the richest man on earth. He could do many things. You know, I thought that, you know, he could probably sort of settle all the old scores. You know, release Khodorkovsky because oil was, you know, already 120 a barrel. So he could easily pay whatever, you know, just he wanted to sort of negotiate a deal and just to get it from his back. So there's no more old scores. And to move on, he could buy an International Olympic Committee to kick out Roget just to become the president. So and to be, you know, just an international figure. There were many options for him. And by the way, unfortunately, I think he would be remembered as, you know, someone who did many great things for Russia. All he did is just, you know, just collected money from high oil prices. But it's an interesting moment because he could do that. And he decided against it. And he wanted to stay in the government. And it's, for me or for my friends, make no mistake, I mean, we realize Putin staying in, even as a technically number two, meant nothing. It's just, you know, he was staying. And that would be forever. So he made a principled decision to stay in power in Russia for the rest of his life. So what shocked us is that on both sides of the Atlantic, that was received with a great relief. Wow! So he decided not to violate the constitution, not to go for the third term, and now will be a new era with, okay, who remembers the name Medvedev? Yeah, and then was Georgia. And you know, after Georgia, you couldn't have any more illusions. It was an invasion of a neighboring country, tiny Republic of Georgia. He was not that bold yet to annex the territories, but it was an invasion. What's happened? You know, the newly sworn president of the United States, Barack Obama, and his newly appointed Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, they offered a new policy, sunshine policy, reset button. So for Putin, it was also, you know, a clear sign that whatever he did or whatever he would do in the future, exactly, you will not see any resistance. And also, when you look at Putin's statements, few times he talked about Republic of Georgia and then later about Ukraine as countries that are doomed to stay in the sphere of Soviet influence. It was, you know, a Third Reich language, basically saying we have territories that even though we don't take them, they still belong to us, and we will do there as we please. So he said it several times before Georgia, and he said it later on. Again, you know, nobody wanted to hear that because by taking these words at the face value would destroy such a nice picture of, you know, us, you know, embracing Putin and negotiating, doing business.